Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What seriously made you think, oh, well, that's a psychopath? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Was my mother's ex-boyfriend. He used to be a great guy. He even raised me like one of his daughters by doing stuff like paying for my school fees and buying stuff for me. Don't know what happened, but his relationship with my mother turned sour and shit went crazy. He locked us in the house, then locked the fridge, so my mother and I just lived in my bedroom and had to buy a fridge for there and live there. Would turn off the hot water in the morning and lock the gate so I would have to bathe in freezing cold water in winter and have to climb over the walls to get to school. And when she got a court order to get him out of the house, he would stalk her and constantly ram his car into the gate until the early hours of the morning. I think once he snuck into the yard and smeared chicken blood all over our door. All of this in the span of 2 months. I met a psychopath while volunteering with rescue animals, TLDR, at the bottom. Many years ago, I volunteered with stray animals. We'd rescue, fix them, and find families to adopt. After a big rescue, there was a specific animal that was in pretty bad shape, and the vet said it should be euthanized. The vet was very reliable and would never suggest just a drastic procedure if the poor animal had a fighting chance. Because of this rescue, I was interviewed by a TV station, and my picture with the animals appeared in a local newspaper. Right after, one of the members of the group said she'd do anything to save that extremely sick animal and wouldn't let it be euthanized. The group didn't agree because we had over 100 animals also in bad shape that could be saved. She went rogue, banned everyone that didn't agree with her, leaving the animals with us, except the very sick one, by changing the password to all of our pages, organized a big fundraiser to save the animal's life, and so on. She kept posting pictures with the animal on Facebook to gather more money while making up all kinds of lies about the former group members. She also lied, saying she was a veterinarian student when in reality, she was only the cashier of a pet store. I was too busy with the other 100 animals, so just made a new group and didn't pay more attention to her. Anyway, months later, one of the former group members messaged me to apologize for not believing in me when we went against that girl. The reason she finally believed in me was because she took her own animal to the vet for the annual checkup, and when she commented about how well the sick animal was looking, the vet said, "But he died months ago." Then she went to the girl's house to confront her, and the girl finally told her what happened. The girl kept the animal's body in her freezer and would take the corpse for pics to get attention and money. Whoa. She was from an upper middle class family and only snapped after I got interviews and not her, so I'm pretty sure she did all of that for attention. I knew something was wrong with her. Attention whore, pathological liar, but the freezed corpse really got me thinking she was a psychopath. TLDR. Her hid dead animal in her freezer to take pictures for attention on Facebook. Assuming this is a real story, someone would freeze a dead animal for attention? That person, I don't know if they're a psychopath, but they have severe issues. Whoa. I used to be a social worker, had a client that I knew something was off about. He gave everyone the creeps, especially the women in our office. Part of my job required obtaining background checks. We got one on him, and it turns out he was arrested for being a cat serial killer. Guy was stealing cats from his neighborhood and killing them in different ways. He stabbed some of them, threw some against walls, broke their necks, etc., and the police found them in his freezer. Man who lived in my freshman dorm complex at BYU was a natural leader, very charismatic and charming. He went on a Mormon mission to Honduras, and when he came back after 2 years, we bumped into each other, and he invited me to dinner. At dinner, he told me a funny mission story about an elderly widow in Honduras. This woman's little pet dog was sick, and he told her that he'd bring the dog to a vet to be healed. Instead, he euthanized the dog. Shocked, I assumed that the vet had determined that the dog was ill beyond help and compassionately put them down, still not okay without the owner's permission. No, this missionary snapped the dog's neck with his bare hands in the yard outside the widow's house. He was chuckling as he told me as if it was a charming, relatable story. He told the woman that he brought the dog to Jesus. This man seemed absolutely normal, no indication whatsoever that he would do something like this. He should have been sent home from his mission dishonorably. One of my old neighbors had brought a small puppy to his home. One day, when I heard it whining outside, I went out to see what's going on. Two kids from our neighborhood had somehow managed to get their hands on the puppy, and now were playing catch, using the puppy as a ball. Another neighbor also came out at that time. We screamed to the kids and they ran away, leaving the puppy on the ground. It was now whimpering. We took it to the owner. I'm at the till. A coworker comes near me. He says, "Look there. I just see a mother and their two daughters." He adds, "I would F all of them at once." Well, ages were probably 35, 14, and 10. I had tons of reason to hate the guy, but that day, I knew I had found the best reason to hate him. I actually left my job soon after, just so I didn't have to work with him. I was in my jail, and my cellie, who was there on murder charges, and I were looking out our window at the CO who was doing his regular thing, where he would attempt to provoke an inmate into making a first move against him so that the CO could then start to kick the shit out of the inmate, with the help of his CO buddies, of course. And my cellie was like, "That dude is effed up." I was like, "Yes, murder guy, he effing is." This CO also attempted to provoke me by ripping up a letter from my dad while he was doing a cell search. Why rip it up? No reason. It was a really good letter too. I used to read it over and over. The CO ended up moving too far into F around and find out territory. The pod ended up basically politely informing him to roll out. When my ex told me that he knew he was abusing me and that he manipulated people in situations so that no one would believe me, saying that everyone would blame me for staying and trying to fix things, that piece of shit had the gall to laugh while he was saying it. I couldn't leave because we lived in a tiny rural town, and he put me in my car in his name to save money on the title, but actually he'd threatened to call and report the car stolen if I ever left, and my family wouldn't come get me. From what I hear, his life is pretty shitty nowadays, so that's nice. Sadly, I have friends of mine that are in similar situations. They are in like a gilded cage, but they are held captive. Sad. Old coworker used to have anger issues and would often stab chef knives into the tables. A few years later, murdered his grandma, and now serving his life sentence in prison. I still get the creeps thinking I worked alone with him. When I was a teenager, I worked in retail with a woman who I'll call Jackie, who had a son in high school or going off to college. He would come into the store at times, and while I didn't know him very well, I knew of him from those few times he visited. He was always very sweet. Jackie was a bit of your typical Karen, loud, pushy, and had the attitude that she's always right and everyone else just has to deal with her. I quit later that year and was walking by the store a few months after and saw Jackie was working, so I stopped by to say hello with my mother. Jackie informed us that her son, in his first year of university, had been struck on his bike by a drunk driver. She tearfully, in a detailed hour-long story, told us about how he had been on life support as her and her family rushed the 6 hours to his college town to see him, with him dying just as they arrived, and all the details of his funeral. My mother and I were in tears, and I consoling her as she went through this harrowing tale. About 2 months later, I started university and wound up in a class with Jackie's niece, who I had at one time worked with in the store. We were catching up, and I offered my condolences on the death of her cousin. She gave me the weirdest what the F look and asked what I meant. I explained, and she just shook her head saying, "Oh, not at all. Once he got out of the house, he refused to speak with his parents. He's perfectly healthy. Talked to him last week," and laughed. That was a huge moment of realization for what a narcissistic person will do for control of the narrative and for pity. And the fact that it was just another thing Jackie does was terrifying. Scary shit. She even described the floral arrangements at her son's funeral. She started hating my friends overnight. She told me she would kill her. She wished some horrible things would happen to my friend, like being kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered. She threatened to harm herself and blamed my friend. She formed a friendship with another psycho in order to talk shit and spread rumors about my friends. She got people to plan to ambush and beat up my friends. She got popular kids to join in on bullying my friends and spread lies. She would grab my friend's hair and yank it hard randomly. She had two friends who both had disabilities. She would punch and slap them very hard repeatedly in class. She would also color with highlighters on their uniform and their personal property. Her friends had learning disabilities, and she would distract them by causing them to fail. She would take their things without asking and not return them. She was obsessed with this guy. Any girl who would go near him was her enemy. She was his stalker. When he got a girlfriend, all she did was talk badly about her and spread rumors about her. She knew someone who knew his family, so she made her tell them that his girlfriend wasn't good enough and other lies. She would manipulate teachers to pity her. She would make the teachers believe that other students were bullies or bad people. She was the cause of several fights at school. The cops even got involved because of how often she and my friend were in the principal's office in a year. I was the head prefect at my high school, public school, and no one paid school fees. Once got called to the boys' bathroom because someone took a dump and smeared all that on the school walls. Mind you, this was a small school with only one cleaner, garden worker, everything manual labor-esque, even simply reaching for something high up on a tree for the sake of a student, and everybody loved him. We asked the kid why he did it, and his response was that his parents owned the school because his parents' taxes are what paid the teachers and the cleaner's salary. There was a disturbed boy at my primary school, notoriously beaten by his violent father. His body was always covered with marks from being hit with a belt. Someone brought their pet turtle to school. The boy pulled off his limbs, then pushed the knife into the shell where the head was hiding. He pepper sprayed the class full of students without the warning. He covered the entrance and exit holes of the bird nest with the baby birds inside, so they died of starvation, unable to leave the nest. He eventually hanged himself on the garden tree just outside his parents' bedroom, so when they opened the curtains in the morning, first thing they saw was him, dead, hanging. He was 12 when he killed himself. I used to work with a very manipulative guy. He had a lot of sob stories, and I would say about half the people who knew him felt sorry for him. Thought he was a good guy, down on his luck, trying to get it together. The other half of us got major creep vibes. Something was just wrong. I wouldn't even talk to him about anything not work-related. Would not even go out after work if he was going to be there. I hated being around him. I warned all the new hires to stay away from him. We had a lot of young girls working there. One night, he did end up attacking one of my coworkers. Luckily, some people saw and broke it up before he could hurt her too badly, and he got fired and banned from the building. I volunteered at a charity clothing shop when I was 18. The manager showed me around, introducing the workers and the sweet lady who worked behind the cash register. They all seemed nice. Out back, there were piles of clothing and other things that needed to be sorted. The manager told me that I could have any single item I liked, if anything caught my eye. I jokingly picked out a children's book about hedgehogs or some crap and said, "Guess I'll get reading." She left me to it, and after a little while, the other worker who was out back with me left. That's when this little older lady who worked the cash register came out and walked over to me. She pointed at the book and said, "So you're going to read that, are you?" I said, "No, I was just joking. It's not really my thing." Suddenly, she leans in and starts whispering all evil-like, telling me I'm not going to get away with bullying or taking the piss out of the girls working there. She essentially threatens me that if I don't work hard, she will see to it that I will regret it. I was genuinely scared of her. The difference in how she had behaved earlier and how she was behaving then was mental. I think I stammered an agreement and just kept my head down for the week I volunteered there. I didn't incur her wrath. Still have no idea if she was watching me on cams or what, but it was 12 years ago, and I'm still scared of her.
Well, that old lady was mad about something. Maybe it's just her nature, but, you should be scared of her, I guess.
They didn't tell me about a whole kid, then lied when I found out, made up a backstory so I wouldn't mention said kid around their family, who all knew about kid. They killed dog, cut me off from my own bank account when I was on a road trip, and blamed addiction, their family and mental illness for all the bullshit, so I'd take them back. I did. It happened again, but worse. Fool me once, shame on you. Twice? Well, I'm a bit cognitively impaired. Anyway, The therapist and psychologist I see were super concerned, and then the marriage counselor who saw both of us and asked me to leave and contact the police because they were worried his detailed jokes about murdering me were no jokes but plans. Well, they said something about psychopathy. I thought only things like that happened on TV, in movies, and never to quiet people. I'm weird and small. Makes no sense. Went on half of one date. It was painfully clear during dinner that she was completely effed in the head. 10 minutes in and she's talking, moving in with me. It didn't get better after that, so I excused myself and noped the F out of there. 2 weeks later, I'm coming out of Walgreens and I get jumped from behind and wake up in the hospital all effed up. Turns out, she told her banger brother that I got her pregnant and cheated on her. Half an effing date. So he tracked me down and he and 3 homies broke 3 ribs, an orbital socket, 2 fingers, and dislocated my shoulder. Some friends went and had a chat with him and explained the situation and that his sister was insane. He came to my house and apologized, and that was that. Never saw her again, thank F. There's this guy in my uni, freshman year, same class. He was kind of one of those weird kids, sitting alone, didn't talk much. One day, my friend and I had heard he'd said something that he was thinking about taking his life. We talked to him, took him out to party, convinced him to talk to a counselor, and even told one of our professors. Turns out he was abused by his parents, not physically, but mentally. His father used to tell him if he doesn't score a certain number on tests, he would throw him out of the house. I'm from India, so we stay with our parents and not pay for his college and stuff, and many other things. He also said he was very poor, but he started doing well. Then COVID hit and we all went home. I got a call from him that he got very sick and that the left half of his body got paralyzed and he's in the hospital. He said his dad is forcing him to take college online tests in those conditions and telling him if he doesn't score well, he won't pay for his medical bills and throw him out of the house even though he was paralyzed. I talked to him for hours and told him that if he needed us, we were all there for him and just tried my best friend to support him emotionally. Post-COVID, a few months later, we met in uni again outside his dorm. I asked him about his paralysis, and he said he still can move his left hand and specifically said he can't make a fist while showing us his still paralyzed left hand. Next thing I know, he turns around to go to his dorm and makes a fist with that very hand and marches away. My friends and I stand there shocked, not understanding what the F had just happened. Note, right after he said his dad was poor, a few weeks later, he buys a really expensive mobile phone, and a few months later, shows us pictures of his new house, which was pretty big. And by the way, we study in the most costly private university in India. But we thought maybe it was something else, and wanted to believe him because he just looked so sad all the time, and we wanted to help him. This guy in high school, we'll call him Rob, was a charming guy, tall, good-looking, somewhat athletic, charismatic, yet I always noticed that the charm never extended to his eyes. At best, his eyes sometimes looked inquisitive or analytical. At worst, like they were looking into your soul. Usually, they just looked eerily neutral, disconnected from everything else related to him in that moment. He even did theater, so he was a good actor. One day, we were talking about the death penalty. I showed support for it as long as there was no doubt regarding the perpetrator of the presumably extremely heinous crime. Rob flat out admitted he'd just support the death penalty for any reason, just for the fun of it. There was no one else in earshot at all, so I half-jokingly asked if he was a sociopath. He gave a yes but no response, clarified that he was a psychopath. Note, there are differences. He was actually relieved that someone had figured him out, that he could let the mask fall a little around me.